Hey everyone, welcome back. I finally managed to grab the Tenet Arca Plasmor. I've been really want to pick this one up so that I can relive the earlier days, an all-powerful infinite punch-through AoE shotgun. I'm sure you can relate to how it felt to yeet everything in your path back then. I can say they've definitely stepped up their fashion game on modeling the weapons. The Tenet variant has a bit of extra polish, better textures, and better color channels. Just look at that shine. So what has changed between the Old Plasmor and the new? Not as much as the previous video covering the Tetra, I can tell you, but that's more so because the original Plasmor was actually a decent weapon that fell off with armor and steel path, whereas the Tetra family was actually garbage. So let's take a closer look. Once again, the Tenet variant is a souped up variant in all aspects and turns the Plasmor into a proper hybrid weapon while preserving what makes the Plasmor the Plasmor. One unique trick is the Tenet variant has built-in ricochet rounds when you hit terrain, so this means they can bounce back and hit enemies again. Unfortunately, the crit chance has not changed, but in exchange, critical deceleration was recently buffed from 48% crit chance to 200, and the fire rate penalty was dropped from 36% to 20%, so this mod is definitely going to fit on every build you see today. The Tenet finally has proper crit damage stat increasing to 2 from 1.6. Status chance has also increased slightly to 34% from 28%. This is actually pretty important because of how slow firing the Plasmor family is. That's right, the fire rate actually got reduced to 1.0 from 1.1. This is mostly relevant though because we will be supporting it with fire rate as well. Perhaps the biggest buff is the fall off changes from 10 to 20 meters all the way to 18 to 36 meters. This also means the total range of the weapon has increased from 30 meters to 36. With fatal acceleration, fall off doesn't even begin until 25 and the projectile extends to 50. Don't even get me started on the galvanized variant. Reload speed was actually increased to 3 seconds from 2.8 unfortunately. But the last big buff you might notice is the base damage. It's increased to 760 from 600 and that's before the Kuva bonus. A final 60% Tenet Plasmor has 1216 base damage, over twice of the vanilla. Sadly, the Tenet Plasmor I'm showing you today is only 25%, but it is toxin, so it still functions. Just keep that in mind throughout the video, so let's take a look at our builds. The first build focuses around the Plasmor as a standalone weapon. There's a limit on how far you can take Plasmor with this because of its slower reload and slower fire rate. This means the kill consistency will eventually reach a point that the enemies survive randomly will be able to kill you. However, this build does work quite well for standard steel path and I do expect it to scale into the upper hundreds. As Plasmor is a slower firing weapon and we are using it standalone, we will slot both prime point blank and galvanized savvy. You may think this is weird, equivalent to stacking condition overload and prime pressure point, but it's not. Unlike melee, Plasmor hits very slowly, meaning damage is slow, priming is slow, and we don't get much chances to proc viral. Therefore, combining more damage with more status chance is extremely useful. With the infinite punch through of Arca Plasmor, we can take full advantage of the bonus multi-shot from Galvanized Hell once we get the ball rolling. This will also help significantly on making viral procs more consistent. For the crit mods, Rebecca has confirmed we are not getting primed blunderbuss, it was just for clarity. So for the foreseeable future, we will be running critical deceleration because you can't say no to 200% critical chance on shotguns. I'll tell you right now, this is another combat discipline Arcane Avenger build, but that's because I think Plasmor actually needs it to perform at its best. The kills you get will self-damage you. I'm leaving it at rank 0 so you don't kill yourself. This self-damage is able to proc Arcane Avenger, so long as you keep shooting, you will always be above 100% crit. It's extremely dependent on slash procs at higher levels, and with a slow fire rate, you need the best chances you can get. Critical deceleration is also the only way to get crit chance high enough to reach 100 with Avenger. Primed Ravage is our generic critical damage mod. For this build, I am slotting Chilling Reload to make viral to fuel our /DOTs. By taking an innate Toxin Plasmor, we are able to make viral with just a single slot. Hunter Munitions is the way we are going to source our damage against armored units since Plasmor doesn't have an effective way of proccing lots of status. The Primed Bane mod is standard for a slash build to double dip our DOTs. Every faction has fodder units. Shooting through crowds is bound to kill these lightly or unarmored units easily, which will let you keep your stacks on the Galvanized mods. Particularly for Galvanized Acceleration, at 2x kill stacks, the fall off of Plasmor changes to 34.2 meters to 68.4. You can basically snipe stuff across the tile, and the majority of firing distance has no fall off. You can't go wrong with this one. Finally, I've chosen to also run Arcane Tempo in our Warframe's Arcane slot because mod slots are too valuable to fit it otherwise. For my companion, I'm bringing a standard Sentinel. This time I've chosen Worm for Negate, and it also brings the Vigilante set that we want so we can boost Arca Plasmor even further with crits. You might even see some reds, so let's test this build out. I would strongly recommend using a CC frame or helmet to get the most out of Plasmor, as this offsets the extremely slow fire rate while taking full advantage of the infinite punch through. However, for today I won't be doing any of that, as it makes it very hard to see the damage output against these corrupted heavy gunners. You can see the shot naturally ricochets off the back wall, meaning it can actually bounce back and hit the enemies again. The initial damage isn't fantastic because we don't have galvanized axe nor procced arcane tempo, but once you get the weapon going, it's pretty decent at killing. I would say it's a solid build for Steel Path, but the weapon is nothing amazing. Just a comfortable, easy mouse one-tapping experience. Once you have the galvanized stacked up, it does rather decently well. Much more multi-shot, much more status procs, and more base damage. Actually, I'll show you a variant of this build. So if you bring a Panzer Vulpaphyla instead, I use this particular build on it by the way, as it lets you have decent survivability while still spreading spores pretty well, keeping you alive and reviving whenever it dies. Bringing a Panzer lets you skip Chilling Reload and Viral, which your cat will spread across the tile with more stacks than Plasmor could ever hope for. You will instead slot Prime Tactical Pump, that mod I told you all to pick up from Barrel last week. This cuts the reload down to just 1.5 instead of 2.1 Chilling Reload. It's just a little bit extra, but trust me, you will really feel the difference. And Vulpaphyla will also give you more than what the Vigilante set bonus would, since you're already above 100% crit chance so long as Avenger is up. I'm showcasing this build quickly too, and you'll see it functions essentially the same but feels a bit better and really takes advantage of all those spores. The Pure Toxin is also handy for Corpus, as you can now completely bypass their shield. So this is the go-to build for my typical Steel Path if I bring a Panzer. Now you may notice this max DPS config. Let's take a look at that, shall we? So this is a special build where I completely eschewed Prime point blank. This is actually because the build is intended to be played with the primary Arcane, primary Merciless. This gives us up to 360% extra base damage and makes up easily for no primed point blank. Each stack lasts 4 seconds and you get 1 per kill up to 12 stacks, with each giving 30% base damage. When the timer runs out, you only lose a single stack and then it counts back down from 4 seconds, so it shouldn't be too hard to keep it at 10 stacks or higher in Steel Path. You also get an additional 30% reload speed and 100% ammo max of rank 5, so this works even better with Chilling Reload and drives reload down all the way to 1.76 seconds, which is barely slower than Prime Tactical Pump. So for that first slot, we are running Modus Setup instead for more critical chance and status chance. You already bullet jump around a lot, so this just cranks that up one notch further. This build actually doesn't need a Panzer to function properly. It's actually intended to be run with a Sentinel for the Vigilante bonus. The Modus Setup will give you an extra 100% crit and status chance. This pushes your crit chance all the way up to 88% or 133 with Avenger up. This means even if you don't have Avenger active, you still have an extremely high chance of critting, and when it is up, well, you're going to see a lot of oranges mixed in with the yellows, and maybe even a couple reds. But what is probably the most important part is the 100% status bonus pushes us all the way to 95.2% status chance. You now have a very consistent source of viral procs, as it has 50% elemental weight in the build. With 3.3 bullets fired per trigger pull, you will proc on average 1.5 viral procs on every enemy you hit. Additionally, this setup is also meant to be used with a primer. Once again, I'm bringing a Zor's primer, but this time it would be built differently with magnetic and gas, as well as the innate electric to cover the elements Plasmor doesn't have. This way we get the most out of galvanized savvies possible while also increasing our CC capability. So as you can see, it is a pretty complicated build that focuses around pushing Tenet Arca Plasmor to its utmost limits. Unfortunately, I don't have any copies of Primary Merciless, so you're going to have to test that one out for yourself, as I can't show you the full power of this weapon today. But what I can do is give you a quick rundown on what it looks like without the Arcane. Once again, you'll need to put in some effort to get the early kills, but once things ramp out, it will be a killing frenzy. Fodder units will help a lot to get the snowball started. Finally, there is one last config going on here, the quote-unquote low-level config. What exactly is this, you may ask? It's intended for generic star chart stuff or fissures if you want to bring this in. It's a bit for a non-endless Steel Path, but it literally is a fire and forget gun. We use the innate toxin to build corrosive so that the weapon has both radiation and corrosive on the same build to handle armored units up front. There is higher corrosive weight so that we can actually strip some armor, since we're trying to kill with upfront damage as well as hunter munitions. Don't expect too much from the slash though, as in this case it's more support than our main DPS, since we're not fueling it with bonus damage from Savvy or Merciless. If you do slot in Merciless though, it will probably allow this thing to work properly, but I still expect it to fall off extremely quickly in endless modes. It is essentially a max quality of life, minimal effort build. So we are once again slotting Prime Tactical Pump to get reload down to 1.5 seconds and taking advantage of the only primed elemental shotgun mod, Prime Charge Shell, to make corrosive. We are also actually directly slotting fire rate on the weapon itself this time to offset critical deceleration without needing arcane tempo. Like I said, this is your quote-unquote low-level build, or basically just for when you don't care and aren't intending to do anything too serious. This is probably the nicest part about the Tenet variant, letting you make builds like this with the innate element that would otherwise be near impossible in the vanilla Plasmor, which also has much lower raw damage. And this is it for the Tenet Arca Plasmor. While not a showstopper like the Tenet Tetra, it is still a good gun, and fun. It gets the job done without too much effort, maybe even too little effort as seen in the 4th build, but that does have a limit on how far it can go. But it also can rear its head as a monstrous abomination if you're willing to cater your loadout around it, as you saw on the max DPS config. I'm not exactly sure how far the max DPS loadout can go, but I wouldn't be surprised if it scaled into the several thousands at least. Once again, another beautiful looking weapon. DE did a really good job with these. I wonder which gun I'll pick next. If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always, as soon as possible, like I've done with covering the Tempestari and the Sisters of Parvos updates. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. I'm also preparing to get you the info first as more updates come out. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video, thank you all for watching, and see you all next time.